In a courtroom ruled by justice and authority. No one could have foreseen a young girl standing up to a judge and coming out on top. But this wasn't any ordinary teenager. What happened next would leave everyone in stunned silence. Let's uncover this incredible real-life courtroom drama. The courtroom was a picture of formality: wooden benches, polished floors, and a towering judge's bench that seemed to symbolize authority. Judge Harrison leaned back in his chair, a smug smile playing across his face. His voice dripped with condescension as he addressed the young girl standing at the defendant's table. "Miss Parker, do you even understand where you are?" he asked, his tone mocking. Emily Parker, a teenager with unruly curls, stood out starkly in her simple hoodie, jeans, and worn sneakers. The polished floor beneath her squeaked softly as she shifted nervously. Laughter rippled through the courtroom as attorneys exchanged amused glances. Emily held a stack of papers that seemed too heavy for her small frame. Her cheeks flushed, but her gaze never wavered. She locked eyes with the judge, her voice calm but determined. "Your Honor, if you let me speak, you might find it worth your time." The room fell silent, shocked by her audacity. Judge Harrison leaned forward, his smirk deepening into a scowl. No one expected what was about to happen next. The courtroom buzzed with suppressed laughter as Judge Harrison waved off Emily Parker's attempts to speak. His condescending tone echoed through the room. "Miss Parker, this is not a place for childish antics. You're wasting this court's time." Emily's cheeks reddened, but her voice remained steady as she clutched her papers tightly. "Your Honor," she said, her tone unwavering, "justice doesn't depend on age. I'm here to defend my client, and I ask only for a fair opportunity to do so." Her words hung in the air, met with shocked murmurs from the audience. The attorneys sitting at their desks exchanged incredulous glances, clearly doubting the young girl's capability. Judge Harrison raised an eyebrow, his smug smile faltering. He leaned forward, narrowing his eyes at Emily. "Fine," he said mockingly. "If you insist. Miss Parker, enlighten us all." The courtroom fell silent as Emily stepped forward, placing her stack of papers on the desk. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze remained fixed on the judge. She took a deep breath, and with surprising composure, began to speak. Emily's voice cut through the silence with clarity and precision. "Your Honor, I represent my client, Mr. Mitchell Peterson, who has been falsely accused of embezzling funds from his employer. The evidence presented against him fails to hold up under scrutiny." She opened her file, pulling out documents and flipping to a specific page. "Here. You'll see discrepancies in the financial records. Funds were transferred to accounts Mr. Peterson had no access to." The courtroom buzzed with renewed interest. Even the skeptical attorneys began to lean forward, their curiosity piqued. Emily continued, her tone growing more confident. "According to legal precedent established in Smith v. Bradshaw, my client is entitled to a thorough investigation before any judgment can be made. Yet, no such effort was undertaken." Judge Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair, his previous arrogance giving way to reluctant attention. Emily turned to the audience, briefly glancing at Mr. Peterson, who sat beside her, his expression a mixture of hope and fear. "The prosecution has made bold claims," she said, her voice firm. But their evidence is riddled with inconsistencies. And I intend to prove it. As she laid out her first set of documents on the table for the judge's review, the tension in the room became palpable. Emily's professionalism and knowledge began to overshadow her youthful appearance. For the first time, the courtroom started to see her as a formidable advocate. Not just a teenager in a hoodie. Judge Harrison cleared his throat and leaned back in his chair. "Proceed," he said begrudgingly, his tone less mocking than before. The room waited, hanging on Emily's every word, as the balance of power began to shift in her favor. Emily had barely finished presenting her first set of evidence when the courtroom doors creaked open. Heads turned to see a tall man in a crisp suit stride in, carrying a leather briefcase. He walked with authority, his expression unreadable, as he approached the judge's bench. "Your Honor," the man announced, "I'm Daniel Hayes, a representative of the Bar Association. I'm here to observe this case and ensure procedural fairness." Judge Harrison's brow furrowed, his annoyance evident. "Mr. Hayes, this is highly irregular. I wasn't informed the Bar Association would be involved in this matter." Hayes offered a polite smile but remained firm. "Given the circumstances, a minor representing a client in a high-stakes case, it's within our purview to ensure justice is served. And from what I've seen so far, Miss Parker is well prepared to proceed." A wave of murmurs rippled through the courtroom as Judge Harrison's expression darkened. He adjusted his robe and leaned forward, glaring at Emily. "Miss Parker, it seems you've garnered quite the audience. Let's see if you can live up to the expectations." Emily glanced at Hayes, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. With her confidence bolstered, she turned back to the judge. "Thank you, Your Honor. I'll do my best to ensure justice prevails." Just as the courtroom began settling into Emily's presentation, another interruption shook the atmosphere. The doors opened again, and in walked a woman with a commanding presence, dressed in a sleek blazer and heels that echoed with every step. She carried herself with an air of authority. "Your Honor," she said, her sharp voice slicing through the room, "I'm Margaret Steele from the District Attorney's Office. I've been assigned to oversee this case and present additional evidence." Judge Harrison's irritation was palpable. "Miss Steele, this case is already underway. What could justify your sudden appearance?" Miss Steele offered a cold smile, her gaze briefly landing on Emily. "Let's just say there's more to this situation than meets the eye. I have a witness whose testimony is crucial to the court's understanding of the facts." Emily's heart sank as Miss Steele gestured toward the back of the courtroom. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, his smirk exuding confidence. "Your Honor," Miss Steele continued, "I'd like to call Victor Grant to the stand." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Emily's client, Mr. Peterson, shifted nervously beside her. She quickly stood. "Your Honor, I object to this witness. His testimony has no bearing on the facts of this case and could unfairly prejudice the court." Judge Harrison raised his hand to silence her. "Miss Parker, I'll decide what's relevant. Mr. Grant, take the stand." Emily clenched her fists as Victor Grant took his place, radiating smug superiority. She could feel the weight of the courtroom's judgment pressing down on her. Miss Steele began her questioning, focusing on discrediting Emily's capability and professionalism. "Mr. Grant, You're familiar with Miss Parker's actions during her brother's trial. Are you not? Grant nodded, his smirk widening. Yes. And let me just say her behavior was anything but professional. Emily's jaw tightened as she prepared to challenge the narrative. She stood again. Your Honor, I object. If Mr. Grant's testimony is based on personal opinions rather than facts, it should be stricken from the record. Judge Harrison sighed, clearly irritated by the interruptions. Miss Parker, you'll have your chance to cross-examine. For now, sit down. Emily Saturday, her mind racing. She knew Miss Steele and Victor Grant weren't here by coincidence. Their presence was part of a larger strategy to undermine her and her case. But she refused to back down. The stakes had never been higher. And Emily was determined to prove her worth. Victor Grant sat confidently on the witness stand, his smirk never wavering. He leaned back slightly, adjusting his tie as he began his testimony. Miss Parker, he said with a sly grin, is no stranger to dramatic displays in court. During her brother's trial, her outbursts disrupted proceedings and undermined the decorum expected in a courtroom. Judge Harrison glanced at Emily, his expression skeptical. Miss Parker, care to address these claims? Emily stood, her voice calm but firm. Your Honor, Mr. Grant's statements are vague and lack supporting evidence. I ask for specifics. Grant's smirk faltered slightly. She was argumentative, loud, and refused to accept the court's ruling. Emily's gaze sharpened. Mr. Grant, were you present during my brother's trial? No, Grant admitted. Then your testimony is based on hearsay, isn't it? Emily pressed. Grant shifted uncomfortably. I've reviewed reports. Reports that are conveniently aligned with your narrative. Emily interrupted. Unless you can provide direct evidence of my supposed behavior, your testimony is nothing more than personal opinion. The courtroom murmured in agreement as Grant's confidence began to wane. Judge Harrison frowned, clearly noting the weakness in Grant's claims. Just as the tension in the room reached its peak, the courtroom doors burst open once again. A disheveled man in his late 40s stumbled in, clutching a USB drive in his hand. Your Honor, he called out, his voice trembling but loud enough to command attention. My name is Henry Willis. I have evidence that will change everything. The room erupted into chaos as Judge Harrison banged his gavel. Order. Who is this man? And what evidence is he referring to? Willis approached the bench, holding the USB drive up for everyone to see. This drive contains video footage and records that prove Victor Grant is involved in a corruption scheme. Evidence was suppressed. Not just in this case but in others as well. Grant's face twisted in fury. This is absurd. He's a disgruntled former employee trying to smear my name. Emily stood, her voice cutting through the noise. Your Honor, if this evidence is genuine, it could expose corruption and exonerate my client. Judge Harrison hesitated, his composure visibly shaken. Finally, he nodded to a bailiff. Retrieve the drive. Let's see what this is about. The bailiff inserted the USB drive into a laptop connected to the courtroom screen. The grainy footage showed a private meeting where Grant was seen discussing fabricated evidence and financial transactions implicating others. The room fell into stunned silence as the revelations unfolded. Gasps and whispers rippled through the audience. Grant leapt to his feet. "This is doctored. None of it is real." Judge Harrison's stern voice cut him off. "Enough. Mr. Grant. We'll let forensic analysts determine the authenticity of this evidence. For now, sit down." Willis turned to Emily. "There's more on the Drive bank transfers. Emails. Everything." Emily's heart raced as she realized the implications. The tide had turned. And Grant's carefully constructed facade was crumbling before her eyes. Judge Harrison took a deep breath, clearly grappling with the enormity of the situation. "This court will review the evidence thoroughly. Until then, I suggest everyone prepare for the next session." As the courtroom began to disperse, Emily felt a surge of hope. For the first time, the truth was finally coming to light. And she was ready to fight with everything she had. The courtroom was tense as Miss Steele stood, a stack of printed emails in hand. Her expression was smug as she turned toward Judge Harrison. "Your Honor, the prosecution has uncovered emails that directly implicate Mr. Peterson in the embezzlement scheme. These documents show that he not only orchestrated the transfers but also tried to cover his tracks." Miss Steele handed the documents to the judge, who began flipping through them. The audience murmured, and Mr. Peterson shifted uneasily in his seat. Emily stood, her voice cutting through the whispers. "Your Honor, I'd like to question the authenticity of these emails. Given the emerging evidence of corruption, it's plausible these were fabricated to strengthen the prosecution's case." Miss Steele's smirk faltered. "Are you suggesting the district attorney's office would present falsified evidence?" "I'm suggesting that it's our duty to ensure the evidence presented in this court is genuine," Emily replied firmly. "I request a forensic analysis of these emails before they are admitted as evidence." Judge Harrison rubbed his temples, clearly grappling with the mounting complexities of the case. "Miss Steele, do you have any objections to this request?" Miss Steele hesitated but eventually nodded. "No. Your Honor. Let the evidence speak for itself." A forensic analyst was called to examine the emails. The courtroom waited in agonizing silence as the expert worked. Finally, the analyst stood and addressed the court. "Your Honor, my analysis shows that these emails have been altered. The timestamps and headers have been manipulated, and several lines of text were inserted after the fact. These documents are not authentic." The courtroom erupted into chaos. Judge Harrison banged his gavel, demanding order. "Miss Steele," he said sternly, "this is a serious breach of legal ethics. I'll be referring this matter to the appropriate authorities." Emily glanced at Mr. Peterson, who looked both relieved and stunned. She knew the tide had officially turned. Emily rose from her seat, clutching a few handwritten notes. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "Your Honor, members of the court," she began. "Today we've seen the lengths to which people will go to manipulate the truth. We've seen evidence fabricated, testimonies tailored to mislead, and a system willing to sacrifice an innocent man for the sake of convenience." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. "But justice isn't about convenience. It's about truth. It's about ensuring that every person, no matter their status or circumstances, is given a fair chance to defend themselves. Emily turned toward Mr. Peterson, her voice softening. My client, Mr. Peterson, is a hard-working man who has spent his entire career building trust and integrity. He's been accused of a crime he didn't commit. And the evidence presented today proves that. She held up the forensic analyst's report. These fabricated emails were used to paint a false narrative. But the truth is clear: someone else is responsible for the discrepancies in the financial records. Mr. Peterson is not a thief. He's a victim of a corrupt system. Her voice grew stronger as she addressed the judge directly. Your Honor, we've uncovered corruption in this case. But this is about more than just Mr. Peterson. It's about sending a message that this kind of behavior will not be tolerated. Justice is not just a word, it's a principle that must be upheld, no matter the obstacles. Emily stepped back, her final words resonating through the silent courtroom. I urge you to dismiss the charges against Mr. Peterson and let the truth prevail. Judge Harrison sat in contemplative silence before leaning forward. After reviewing the evidence and hearing the arguments, I find the charges against Mr. Peterson to be baseless. This case is dismissed. The courtroom erupted in applause and cheers. Mr. Peterson turned to Emily, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered, his voice breaking. As the courtroom buzzed with celebration, Emily allowed herself a small, victorious smile. She had fought against overwhelming odds, and justice had finally prevailed. But in the back of her mind, she knew the battle against corruption wasn't over yet. The courtroom emptied slowly, but the joy and relief were palpable. Mr. Peterson approached Emily, his expression a mix of gratitude and disbelief. Tears glistened in his eyes as he reached out to shake her hand. Miss Parker, he began, his voice trembling. I don't know how to thank you. You've given me my life back. Emily smiled softly. You don't need to thank me, Mr. Peterson. You deserve justice. And that's all I wanted to fight for. He hesitated, then added, you remind me of my daughter. She always believed in doing the right thing, no matter how hard it was. She would have been proud to see someone like you stand up for what's right. Emily's throat tightened, and she nodded, feeling the weight of his words. As Mr. Peterson walked away, she stood alone for a moment, reflecting. The victory was sweet, but her thoughts inevitably drifted to her brother's case. The evidence revealed today Victor Grant's involvement. The corruption exposed felt like pieces of a larger puzzle. Her brother's wrongful conviction wasn't just a family tragedy, it was part of a system that had failed to uphold justice. Emily clenched her fists, determination burning in her chest. This was just the beginning. As Emily gathered her things, a shadow loomed over her. She turned to see Victor Grant, his face contorted with fury. Despite the courtroom's outcome, he exuded an unsettling confidence. You think this is over? He hissed, his voice low enough that only Emily could hear. You've made powerful enemies today, Parker. This little victory of yours won't last. Emily met his gaze, her expression calm but unyielding. Justice isn't about winning or losing. It's about the truth. And people like you can't keep hiding it forever. Grant's smirk returned, cold and menacing. We'll see how far you get before the system swallows you whole. You're just a kid playing lawyer. And you're way out of your depth. He turned and walked away, leaving Emily standing in the now empty courtroom. His words lingered. But instead of fear, they fueled her resolve. Emily took a deep breath, her mind racing with possibilities. The fight wasn't over. If anything, it had only begun. She knew there were more battles ahead. But she was ready. Clutching her files, she stepped out into the crisp evening air, the weight of victory balanced by the knowledge of the challenges still to come. The truth was worth fighting for, and Emily Parker was just getting started. What started as a seemingly impossible challenge turned into a groundbreaking victory. Emily Parker's bravery and determination shattered stereotypes and exposed the deep corruption that plagued the system. Her refusal to back down, even in the face of condescension and mockery, revealed the truth. Evidence tampering, corruption, and deceit couldn't withstand the light of justice. And thanks to her relentless pursuit of fairness, Mr. Peterson, a man falsely accused of embezzlement, walked free. This case wasn't just about winning, it was about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are stacked against you. Emily proved that age, experience, and appearances don't define one's ability to fight for justice. Emily's story reminds us all of the power of persistence and courage. It shows that even when the system feels overwhelming, one voice, one action, can make a difference. Justice isn't always easy to achieve, but it's worth fighting for, no matter the obstacles. This isn't just a story about a courtroom victory, it's a story about believing in yourself, challenging the status quo, and never giving up. If Emily Parker can take on a judge, a corrupt witness, and a stacked system, imagine what we all can achieve by standing up for what's right. If this story inspired you, share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you do if you were in Emily's shoes? Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more real-life stories like this one. Together, let's keep spreading hope and inspiration.